Sentiment video for the 26th of July 2020 for the QuasiDB service. What I'll do, just very briefly, I won't talk too much. All I'll say is that where prices with respect to pivot, monthly pivots, and resistance and support. So just a quick one, we're above monthly pivot for AJ. There's your SLCs, they're very wide, and it's currently neutral, it's 50%. So really flip a coin to be careful with that one. I'll include the MyFX book, which is what we use our data for on the spreadsheet. Watch that. That tends to lead the others for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why. If it goes up, it's bearish. Okay. Aussie dollar. MR1, 1794. Stocks clusters are closer than AJ's. One above is slightly larger, only very small amount larger. 31% long, so it's a buy. Next month's pivot's higher than this month's. August's pivot is 70.54. So possible bounce here. Remember, that's your technical bias. If it's bullish above and bearish below, just keep it nice and simple. Use your monthly pivots. So whenever it's above, you buy dips. All right. And we're getting close to the end of the month now. So that's the level of interest next month, 70.54. Euro Oz. Do daily actually, and that way we can see next month's pivot. H4 perhaps. Yeah, okay. So next month's pivot is lower, as you can see, slightly lower, so that would be potentially bearish. And we've taken the SLC, we are above monthly pivot, and we're a buy at my FX book. So it's very erratic. It's coming down really heavily, and by coming down heavily, it's come up a strong buy. But remember, it needs to cross this 50% line. So there's your next month's pivot. So quite bearish, but the sentiment is pointing down. So that looks quite a strong buy. So something to keep an eye on. That one. Do the H4 for Euro USD. I think the next month's pivot is going to be miles above. Yeah. So if we had 1125, 1149. So huge gap up. Massive difference in the monthly pivot, so that's hugely bullish. So that's your level of interest now for August. So 114.98. Now the dotted line, in case you're wondering, is the halfway point between the MR2, MR3, and then the MR1, MR2. It's just a nice way of just dividing the two together. So we're above the halfway point between MR2 and MR3. So 116.48 would be a level of interest there. SLCs are quite close, and the one above is larger, and you can see we're very close to that. Yeah, so just keep an eye on the next month's pivot there. So it's bullish, and we've got a bullish sentiment. So do H4 on the cable. 4 hour. Right, so we've got a slight increase there. 12487, 12651. So that's your level of interest. Stocks clusters fairly close. The one above is larger. It's a buy. Go to H4. Right, big gap up. So that's bullish. 6590. MR1 is 6629. So FX books pointing down, isn't it? Really sideways. So that's a buy. Quite bullish. Here again, H4. So buy in the sentiment. Got a monthly pivot is significantly higher. It's 100 pips higher. 12272. MR1 12396. So potentially it might hit that again and fall. It'll probably want to get the SLCs first. So you find that the price is erratic. You're not really quite sure why, but it just wants your stop losses. So this is why, even though it looks like it should fall because these bearish Heikin-Ashi candles, there was so much volume, retail liquidity in stops, and it just reversed. And I thought, well, let's get that, and then we can fall. And it will use that technical justification to fall. So it hit MR1, but really it took the stops, and that's what happens. So it's where you want to keep an eye on the order book. And if you haven't got this, then you can subscribe to the QuasiDB, and you get this updated every day. Yeah, that explains the erratic nature of price action because it's a stop loss, a stop hunt. So pound yen, H4. You see where the pivot is for August. That's actually nuts. Oh, we're actually bang on, near enough. 1350987, 1350983. We're not finished with the month yet, so whatever happens this week, this will change. So if we go higher up, this will come higher up too. If we come lower down, this will come lower down. So it's going to be a pivotal week, pardon the pun, for pound yen. So it's currently a sell, but it might be on the tailcoats of cable. If the pound USD flies, then this will probably join it. And if the euro pound dumps, then that will really help this one too. All pound crosses. So keep an eye on the euro pound if you're trading sterling. It's very important. Dollar yen, go to H4. There we've got a lower projection on the pivot. So there's your level of interest for August, 106.64. We did have a quite nice bounce and we're above MS1. The ratios are pointing up, so it's bearish. Currently a sell. Medium volume point is pointing down. So yeah, and we've got a sell there because the profit ratio has crossed over at that point. When it finally decided to cross over, 107.16 ish, and then you see how they got trapped. So that's that. Dollar CAD, go to H4. Hopefully these pivots are going to be helpful for you guys. So we've got a bearish projection for the dollar CAD, so 13469. That's your level of interest. Remember the rule, the pivot rule, bearish below, bullish above. Quite a lot of chop. I didn't quite know what it was doing. It finally broke down. But we do have MS1 at 13326. My FX book line is quite bearish, so they're really holding on to their longs. So it's going to sell. Dollar Swiss, H4. It's been a huge sell for a long time. And for all that time, it's been a sell. So next month's pivot is lower down at 9299. So we could probably climb above, perhaps get close to this medium volume point line, and then it might just bounce on the monthly pivot and then see what happens. And then last but not least, gold. Currently a buy. Oops. Let's go to H4. And the pivot will be huge. Yes, it's ridiculous. It's $100, $110 higher than it was in July. So remember, if it falls below the pivot, then that's your technical bias. So if it falls below 1854 in August, that's going to be technically a sell. Okay, so we'll have to see what happens this week that's coming up. Everything is pointing up, bullish. Ichimoku, the sentiment, your pivot. What is interesting is that I've got a FX multimeter, which is available for free on the Codebase on the MQL website. But what we're seeing some divergence on the MAs. The MAs are pointing down now on the smaller time frames on M1, M5, M15, and 30. But the MAs are strong on the higher time frames, so H1, H4, D1. earlier on in the week, it was solid green. So even the small time frames were pointing up, and the low time frames were too. But we're seeing the smaller time frames are now pointing down. So we're seeing a divergence now. So that could be of interest. Now, if that does, say if that one comes lower down, then it's going to think, well, this one will come down too, and this one as well. So it might be pointing at a sign of a reversal technically, but you do want to keep an eye on the sentiment as well. So at my FX book, just take all these guys off. See, they're actually going long, which is interesting. If it crosses the 50% line, it becomes a sell. There's your average line, is that dotted line there. So yeah, have a look for the FX multimeter. If you can't find it, I'll put it in the Telegram on the private chat. Not a problem at all. Put it on my Google Drive, and you guys can get access to it that way. But it's cool just for divergence regions. But I find that having this FX multimeter on all the charts with the FX SSI suite, it does slow your laptop down. So I only really have it on a pair that I'm looking at really. And hopefully it helps where you are with pivots and next month's pivots as well. So have a good weekend, and I'll speak to you soon.